Hi, I'm Loredana Hager. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I would like to share with you a very favorite recipe of mine that my mom has made many times, and it's one of my most favorite. And this is what we call in our family Parmigiana. And when we say Parmigiana, we know that it's referring to eggplant parmesan, as the Americans call this dish. I want to show you first of all what are the ingredients that are used in this wonderful recipe. There are eggplants, and I'll tell you in a minute the variety of the different types of eggplants that can be used. Parmesan, Parmigiano Reggiano, that I like in terms of type of cheese. Fresh mozzarella, some fresh basil, and of course some sauce, some basic tomato sauce. And actually I've made a video that you can check out my YouTube channel, how to make this sauce. As I said, this is one of my favorite dishes. Some people, when they make this particular recipe, they will use a meat-based sauce. And actually my mom has made that in the past, but I prefer a lighter kind of tomato sauce. So you can check again also my video on how to make a meat-based sauce, and you can experiment either trying this type of sauce or the meat-based sauce with this particular recipe and see which one you prefer. Now in terms of the eggplants, there are a variety, many varieties, and the one that I grew up with are what we call in our family, they're called Italian eggplants, and usually they are more round, they're kind of a pear-shaped, they're much shorter than these that you see here on this cutting board, and they're very dark purple. Over the years, as I've made this recipe on my own, I've experimented with different types of eggplants, and I actually prefer this over the Italian eggplants for a couple of reasons. I find this a little milder, and it's not as bitter, and I don't have to salt them to get rid of some of the extra bitterness and juice, and they have also fewer seeds. In addition, these ones that you see here on this cutting board are homegrown. My husband is a wonderful gardener, and so we plant these every year, and this is one of the early harvests that we've had so far. Of course, there are many more that we've been able to get so far from our eggplant plants. But these are the types that I like. Because I don't have to salt them, I can count on them being very sweet and not having many seeds. Also, you may come across other recipes of eggplant parmesan. Many will leave the peel on. In my family, our traditional recipe, we remove the peel. And also the traditional way of cooking the eggplants is actually frying it before you layer it and put it together. Also over the years, I've tried to be more calorie conscious, and I've experimented actually baking rather than frying these eggplants because they will absorb quite a bit of oil. So I'll show you later how to do both versions, and then you can decide what you prefer. So in addition to the tomato sauce, the eggplant, the Parmesan cheese, the fresh mozzarella, and the basil, you will need some canola oil. I have a couple of varieties, the liquid kind, to fry these in. If you decide to bake them, I like to spray the pan with a bit of canola oil so it won't stick when I bake them. And then of course, finally, this is the dish that I will be making this eggplant parmesan. Depending on many eggplants you have and the size, how long you want to cut them, you can use a bigger dish. But for today, for the amount of eggplants that I will be using, I find that this particular dishware will be perfect for this recipe. So let's go over to the other counter, and I will show you how to cut these eggplants, and then we will fry some and bake some and see what you like. So I'm getting ready to continue peeling some of these eggplants. I've already cut some, as you can see. Earlier, I forgot to mention the type of eggplants that I do like to use are called Japanese eggplants, or some call them ichiban or ikiban. I'm not sure I'm saying it right, but they are a nice purple color, but not as dark, and they're longer than the Italian eggplants. What I'm going to be doing is peeling them all, and then you can see that here on the cutting board, I've already cut some, and I've sliced them to about 1/4 inch thick. You don't want them too thin, but neither too thick because they're going to be layered. As well, I've cut the eggplant in half and then sliced them. It doesn't really matter the length. It's really a preference because you're going to be layering them in the dish, and so you're not going to be able to see how long the original eggplant was because you're going to be slicing it when you serve it. So I'm going to be finishing peeling and slicing these eggplants, and then I will show you the process for either frying them or baking them. So I have this large frying pan. I use the canola oil to cover the bottom. You see there's plenty of it. And of course, as you have a large batch, you want to continue adding more oil so that you always have enough. And as I mentioned earlier, the eggplant will absorb quite a bit of the oil. You want to get a nice golden brown color. You don't want them burned. You can see I'm starting to flip some of them. And you want to cook both sides before you drain them on some paper towels, and then you keep going through the whole process. I have a whole plate full of these, so this will take me a while, but I just wanted to show you what they need to look like on both sides. So they need to be this nice golden color, so it's not quite ready. So you just need to check it as you go along. I have the heat medium-high. You don't want it to be too low because then the eggplant will just continue absorbing oil and it will not brown quickly enough. So I'll finish this, and then I also want to show you the process that I've used in the past to actually bake the eggplants. So I'll finish this and then we'll get to the baking aspect of this recipe. As you see here, these are the ones that I've just finished frying. I mentioned earlier that if you don't want fried food and make this recipe, the option is actually baking the sliced eggplant. So I've put these, I sprayed them with canola oil so they will not stick, and I will putting them in the oven. It's about 400 degrees. I'll check in about 10 minutes and I will show you what it should look like. Again, the browning part, and they need to be browned on both sides. And so you'll have to continue doing that with all the eggplants that you slice, if you prefer to bake them rather than fry them. 10 minutes have almost gone, and so as you can see, some have gotten quite a bit brown. It's time to flip them over. Keep an eye on the oven because it will not need another 10 additional minutes. So just keep an eye so that they don't burn, otherwise they will end up being bitter. And you may want to spray a little bit more oil. But again, this is how they look when they're baked versus how they look when they're fried. All right, so I will continue frying some of them and baking, and then we'll put it together. I have just finished frying and baking all of the eggplants, and I want to show you what they look like and compare the two. These are the ones that have been baked. I had put the oven around 400 degrees. Need to monitor the temperature so that they don't burn. These here are fried. You can tell the difference, how they look. I also wanted to show you that they're more fried here. So I had more fried than baked. And to show you that even after I'm done, I put them on some paper towel, it's still absorbing oil. The eggplant, its nature will absorb a lot of oil when you're frying them. So over the years, I have leaned more toward baking it rather than frying it, just because it's more messy, it requires more oil, and a lot more calories. It's definitely a richer flavor, and I definitely would encourage you to try both and see which one you prefer, not only in the process, but the final end product. So this is the first step of this recipe. The second step will be putting together the eggplants with the other ingredients in a casserole dish. So follow me and we will do that and put it all together. The second step then is to put all of the pieces together. I just wanted to mention that the phase one, or the step one of either baking or frying the eggplants, can be done a little earlier if you don't have enough time to do all of this, because it is time consuming doing that step one and then putting it together. You can fry them or bake them, leave them on the side for a little while, and then put it together. So I have the sauce that we cooked right here. The eggplants, as I said, your choice whether you want it fried or baked. I have about 8 ounces of fresh mozzarella. If you buy the mozzarella that is in whey, make sure that you drain all that extra liquid, because then it will get very watery and take a longer time to dry out when you put it in the casserole dish. And then here I have a very generous 1 cup of grated, I use the cheese grater right here, of Parmesan, Parmigiano Reggiano. And of course, the one special key ingredient as well to add flavor is fresh basil, and I'll show you how I put this together. So we'll start with the first step, and we'll take some of the sauce here. Also, one more thing I want to mention, the size of this casserole dish is good for about 4 people. If you're going to use this dish as a main dish, as a side dish, you probably could serve 4 to 6 people. I will be baking this in a small toaster oven because of the size of the casserole dish. Of course, if you're planning to serve this for many more people, then you'll need more eggplants and a larger dish, but the process will be exactly the same. So we'll start with the sauce. What you want to do is just lightly cover the bottom. Remember that this is not like lasagna, so it's not totally covered or full of sauce, but enough to layer it and to flavor it. So what I'm going to be doing is taking the individual pieces of eggplants, and what's important is that when you're putting it in the dish, you want to overlap the pieces, just because it holds better together as when you go and cut it into slices to serve, so that everyone gets a bite of the eggplant and not just sauce or cheese. So of course, if you have a larger eggplant, the pieces are bigger and it will go much faster to cover the dish. And as I said, I've done this enough that I know that the eggplants that I have, and of course I have more that I've fried that I will include in here, that I've done that for demonstration's sake, but I know how many I need to cover this dish. And also what I like to have is at least 2 to 3 layers of the eggplants in the dish. So I'm almost finished with the first layer. I've got a few more to add to make sure that it's all nicely covered. Here. Okay, so as you can see here, the bottom has been totally covered with the eggplants. So then I like to take the mozzarella. Now this was already pre-sliced. If you find it all one piece, you can cut it. You can turn it into little cubes. I like the large slices, and sometimes I'll just use my hands and just kind of layer it and putting it, not layering it, but putting it on each individual layer, the pieces of mozzarella throughout. So as it melts, it covers different area of the dish. And I like quite a bit of mozzarella, and this will melt when you put it in the oven. So again, you want to be generous, or at least I like to be generous. So you do that, then you take a bit of the sauce and you just kind of dab it like that. Does not have to be perfect, because it will all blend in together when this goes in the oven. I'm just showing you the different steps. Then you'll take some of the cheese, and again, I like to be generous. That's why I have about a cup of that, because I really like a lot of the cheese. If you don't use it and you've grated it, then it can be used for other dishes, no problem. It'll keep. So after we do that, we want to add some of the fresh basil leaves. And again, what I do is some of these leaves are really nice and big. Again, basil is very fragile, so it bruises very easily, even just handling it. And this is from my garden. Again, one of the many plants that my husband has grown and takes care of. And it is a very delicate plant and sometimes temperamental how well it does. I think that's plenty. Okay, so then we start again with the next layer. And so you continue doing that until you come to the top. So I will do that, and I will show you at the end the last layer and how it all looks. In the meantime, you can turn on your oven and set it at about 375 degrees. So I will be doing that, and I will come back and show you the end product. I have finished layering and using all of the eggplants that I had. As you can see, it's about 2/3 full. Definitely whatever size of casserole dish and the amount of eggplants that you're using, you want to make sure that you don't get it all the way to the top, because you'll see in a minute I'm going to be adding the sauce, and once I put it in the oven, it might bubble lightly and you don't want it to spill over. So this is a total of 3 layers of the eggplant, the mozzarella, the sauce, the Parmesan cheese, and the basil. Once you get the last layer, whether it's number 2, number 3, or even 4, you want to cover all of this with sauce. So I'm going to be doing that. And remember, I had put sauce, a little bit of sauce in between each layer. You don't want it to be too much. It's not floating in there, but it's enough that once you cut it and serve it, there will be sauce in between and on top, definitely. So as you can see, I'm trying to cover up, and the sauce that we made is very nice and thick, and that's why it's important to use the right kind of tomatoes to get this effect. Also, by being much thicker and not watery, this will also take less time to be in the oven. You don't have to worry about becoming very watery, very soupy, or too juicy. There. I think we want to use all the sauce. It's beautiful. Okay. So remember, I grated quite a bit of Parmesan cheese because I definitely wanted to make sure that I had leftover to put on top. So we're going to do that. Now, once you put this in the oven, it's going to melt. You don't want it to burn, but if it gets a little bit brown, golden brown, that's just fine. Just spread it out. Again, there's plenty also in between, but you definitely want to put it all over on top. Okay, so this is ready to go in the oven. It's been preheated at 375. I can't say it's exactly 20, 30 minutes. It depends on your oven, depends on the side of the casserole dish. But what you want to do is once you put it in the oven, you will want to leave it in there, and you can keep an eye on it to make sure, first of all, that the cheese on top is melted. You'll see it slightly bubbling. If in other words, everything that is in here is already being cooked. Really what you're doing, putting it in the oven, is you're giving it time for the mozzarella in between to melt, the Parmesan cheese to melt slightly and turn golden brown, and just to kind of gel together. So we'll check in about 20, 25 minutes to see whether it's done, and we can turn it off. And I can show you then what it's supposed to look like. The casserole dish has been in the oven now for about 20 minutes. It's not quite ready yet, but I want to show you what it's starting to look like. As you can see, the Parmesan cheese is started to melt, starting to brown a little bit, and also around the edges. You see it's bubbling. It's not quite ready. I want some of this extra juice from the tomatoes, the mozzarella, the eggplant to dry out a little more. I'm going to actually turn it a little bit. And so I just wanted to show you it's not quite ready, so I'm going to put it back in there, and we'll check it a little later. The Parmigiana now has been in the oven for about 35 minutes, and I believe it's done. It's ready to come out, so I'm going to pull it out of the oven and show you what it looks like. As you can see, the beautiful Parmesan cheese has melted. It even started to get a little brown, and that's just fine. Also around the edges. It's, as you see, all the juices that were earlier just bubbling on top have settled. It's dried out, and that's what you want. You definitely want it to let it rest for a good 10 minutes before you attempt to slice it into several pieces. Once it's ready for me to do that, I will definitely show you what it looks like inside, and definitely I will take a bite and let you know how it tastes. The Parmigiana has rested for a while, and I went ahead and cut it. I wanted to show you what it looks like, the different layers, and of course the piece that I've cut is sitting on my plate. And of course the most important part is to try it and see the taste of it. But before I do that, you know, I got really ambitious today. I had some mushrooms in the fridge, so I decided to make some stuffed mushrooms. Wondering how did I make these? Well, that will have to be for another time, so stay tuned. But going back to the Parmigiana, you cannot have this without some wonderful homemade bread that my husband made. So it definitely will be a wonderful plus to accompany this dish. But I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece and give it a try. È semplicemente squisito. Simply delicious. And you know what's wonderful with this bread is to actually accompany it. You can put it on top. You can have a little sandwich with this. Get creative with this, because it's just amazing. The different flavors, the basil, the tomato, the eggplant, the mozzarella cheese all blend together and just make it an exquisite experience. So I hope you will give it a try. Let me know how it comes out and whether you really enjoy this dish like I do, and make it as often as you can. Buon appetito!